into everything that came next. And I think, that is very easy to say in hindsight, going back and saying, yes, my AmeriCorps service led me everywhere. And I also think that is really true. And it was just such a great, as someone who was fresh out of undergrad, had really not been on my own before. It just was such like a safe place to try and fail and figure life out, like figure out what it meant to budget and, like not like spend all my money on stupid stuff and apply for public benefits because I wasn't making a lot of money in AmeriCorps service. And just so many life skills that were learned that are not necessarily taught in traditional education. But having like a space to really do that, that was a little, I don't want to say like less intense or less serious, but yeah, just in a way that made it feel like.
Alrighty, we are back with another AmeriCorps Connections podcast. I'm Nicki Fiocco, the brainchild of this podcast, which was born in, it's crazy to think that we're going on 2 years now, and we're approaching the 100th episode. So I don't know if there's something that you all want me to do, or somebody that you really want me to interview, please, please, please let me know. Just reach out to me. So you've reached the AmeriCorps Connections podcast, where we connect with AmeriCorps alums. And this special series, we're actually connecting with dual service members who have done a service in AmeriCorps and a service in Peace Corps. So just FYI, Peace Corps is a little out of my element, so we make corrections along the way. So I'm going to give an intro to what Peace Corps is. We're adding that. And, just how these experiences are connected and how they're different. This podcast really stemmed from me wanting to know what do AmeriCorps alum do after, what do they do after service? Where are they? And through some of these connections, I feel like people have been meeting like in real life and doing projects. So super happy to be a catalyst to that. We did do something. I say it's me. I created a Patreon account because if you've listened to this for a while, you all know all of the expenses come directly out of my pocket. So if you really like this content and you want me to keep going, not that I'm not going to do it, but it would be super helpful if like couple things were paid for. So if you go on Patreon, AmeriCorps Connections is on there. You could become a monthly subscriber for as little as $5 a month. It would just super help, me being able to pay for things like Zoom, and stuff like that. Okay. I want to also thank Sharon Tewksbury Bloom from Do Good, Be Good and her all AmeriCorps alum team. Thank you so much for marketing this. And I definitely think that a lot of folks that I've been interviewing have come directly from your marketing. So thank you so much, Sharon, for believing in the podcast and believing in me. And I think that's all I wanted to say. So let's just jump right into it. We have Sadie, how do you say your last name?
Botine.
Botine, Sadie Botin with us. I like that last name. That's fun. And you're a service member who did Peace Corps. But before we get started, I do want to just explain what Peace Corps is for folks that aren't aware of it. So Peace Corps is a U.S. government agency that trains and sends volunteers to developing countries to help with international development. And the goal is to promote world peace, friendship by helping people in other countries, and by helping Americans and people from other countries understand each other better. Like, don't we need that right now? And some of the activities, volunteers work in the communities to oversee. They're there for 27 months or just about 2 years, and they provide technical assistance in areas like education, health. Some of the past guests have done agriculture and environment work. And it's kind of cool because citizens of the United States who are 18 and older are eligible for application. So if you're a retiree and you want to do this service, or a college graduate or a working professional that like wants to try something new, definitely this might be something. Sadie's going to inspire you in this, in this podcast, and you're going to want to do it. They do note in the Google review here that Peace Corps is actually really competitive, and around 23% of applicants receive a volunteer position. So if it is something that you're interested in doing and you don't get it the first time, maybe try again. So let's kick it over to you, Sadie. I think you had said that you did your AmeriCorps year first. So how the heck did you find out about AmeriCorps, and why the heck did you get involved with it?
Yeah, great questions. Great to start.
Yeah,
So
let's
I
get right
did
into it.
my I did my AmeriCorps service right after finishing my undergrad degree in 2015. And I think, like many young people, I was very much not sure what I wanted to do after graduating. I did a, very, very lucrative degree in international studies and sociology. So just about as broad as you can go and no really definitive career paths with that. And I think I had originally kind of gotten set up with like the Lutheran Service Corps or something like that. Yeah, Lutheran Volunteer Corps maybe, and they
Okay.
ultimately very similar to AmeriCorps, but a little more community based. You are provided housing, and kind of right around the time I was graduating, I found out that they had offered too many people positions and they had space for. And so I had been essentially waitlisted. And so they kind of told me you can either wait and see if someone drops out or you can kind of withdraw. So me being a planner and like really anxious person, I was like, I have to figure something else out. I can't bank on this happening. And so just kind of really started sporadically applying to different things. I think I knew I wanted to do some sort of like nonprofit work, but what that looked like, I had no idea. And I think eventually a family friend recommended I look into AmeriCorps. So I found myself on the website looking through positions, ended up finding a Vista posting for a refugee resettlement agency, kind of close to my hometown. I'm originally from Iowa. So um, this position was in Des Moines, in the capital, which to me was the big city.
Yeah, exciting.
So I was like, all right, yes, I'm gonna get out of my comfort zone. I'm gonna go to the big city and try out this Vista thing, whatever this was. Um, so yeah, I think I was really, as someone who studied international studies, I was really interested in kind of like international work. And so this kind of seemed like the best of both worlds. It was a nonprofit, plus it was working with international, immigrant populations, and it was low in my mind, low commitment, and that it was like I had a year, I could kind of test it out and
Yes.
see how it went, and then I could figure out what I wanted to do next after that.
That I love that you said that it's only a year. My mantra, and Thomas Darnell's podcast just came out mid October. I don't know when this is going to go out, but I actually worked with him, and he did Peace Corps and AmeriCorps. And the mantra when we were working together is like, you could do anything for a year. It's
Mm-hmm.
literally a year. And I really like with AmeriCorps too, you kind of get started, and it's like if you've ever watched those football games where there's a kickoff and the guy grabs the ball, but then he kind of like drops it and kicks it and fumbles it and is like, oh my God, and that's like the first quarter of a lot of
Yeah, for
AmeriCorps
sure.
experiences where it's like, what am I doing? And then he's
Mm-hmm.
got the ball and he's running with it, right?
Yep.
And then sometimes he gets tackled and then, eventually gets into the end zone. I just feel
Mm-hmm.
like that's a great explanation of the
Yeah.
service year. And it's
Yes.
really like segmented. If you do a full year, I recently supervised a Vista member and it was like December and I go, we need to start thinking about what you want to do next. And he's like, what are you talking about? I said, when January hits, your service year is over. And
Right.
he's like, what? And I'm like, and then as soon as we
It
got into
does.
April, he was like, oh my God, this is wild. So
Mhm.
I love the perspective that you bring in that like, you know, I had an interview with Chrissy Heine. She was Teach for America. That was several podcasts ago, probably in the double digits, early double digits. And she uses a coaching theme, and she says for now, right? Like when
Mm-hmm.
she's coaching people, she's like, okay, you're going to be a podcaster for now. You're going to be a blogger for now, right? Love that perspective. And I also want to point out, I love it when like younger people have these like aha moments of, okay, I'm gonna do this for a year. Let me see how this works out. So kudos on you.
Hmm.
You're early you.
Yes, thank you. Pat myself on the back for that one.
I always love it when my past self is looking out for my future self.
Hmm. Didn't even know it. Yeah, didn't know it at the time,
Yeah,
but
for sure.
well
So,
done.
you found yourself in this new experience. Obviously, you served there. What were some of your memories, experiences, things that you want to highlight?
Hmm. Yeah. I think a big thing for me was just I have this picture that I ended up like cropping side by side. So I had another Vista member serving at this organization with me. And for our first day of service, they asked us to take this photo together, and we're like standing awkwardly, like this far apart, a lot of space between us. And then we took a photo together at the end of our service, and we're like arm around each other and hugging. And it was so sweet to just reflect back on our relationship through service. So I'd say that was a huge thing, was just like meeting new people and building relationships. I also feel really fortunate serving at the Refugee Resettlement Agency. A vast majority of the staff that I worked with were also refugees themselves. So I just was
Wow.
like in a really culturally rich and diverse environment every single day. And I really, really loved that. It was so amazing to learn from other people who had just experienced so many different things. We had, like 12 different languages were spoken in the office. And that just was such a unique experience. I don't think I've ever experienced anything like that since then. That just felt like such a unique opportunity. I think especially in Iowa, we
Yeah.
don't get a lot of experiences like that. So that was really great. We actually would do these regular staff meetings where we do potlucks, and so people would bring a lot of their like traditional foods, and those are always my favorite days. Like people would bring really, really elaborate dishes that were so stinking good.
So I can imagine that working, especially with refugees and especially just kind of in the climate of the United States right now.
Hmm.
I don't know if it was as polarized and scary back then, but it's like it's top of
Yeah.
mind right now.
Yeah.
What were some things that you were kind of like surprised about
Hmm.
that you were like, wow. I remember some specific things in my life, not just in my AmeriCorps service, but in my life where I'm like, wow, that person has to think about this. I don't have to think
Hmm.
about it. I'm not thinking
Yeah.
about it. And it changes my perspective on other people's experiences. Did you have anything
Mhm.
like that where you could clearly identify as like, wow?
Yeah, all the time, honestly. I think I going into it had a very basic understanding of refugees. I had no idea what the resettlement process looked like. I had no idea how hard it actually was to resettle, which I think is such a big common misconception, and something that I in my work and in my service was having to constantly navigate and explain to people that it wasn't just like, I want to leave and I'm just going to hop on a plane and go somewhere else. It's like, being in a camp for several years, going through interviews, medical testing, all of these like background checks before finally getting approved. And then kind of the process once you arrived is like, you kind of have 3 months to figure it out. And then you're let loose almost. And so just the the amount of like resilience that goes into that, to just go somewhere completely new, to have no resources, like maybe you have a family or a family member or someone but maybe you don't, and you're just starting from fresh with like no understanding of the systems, no understanding of English to some
The
degree.
language, right, right.
And so there just was, and I think something I heard a lot from people that weren't as familiar with the process was, oh, it sounds really great. You have someone pays for your plane ticket, and then you get housing for 3 months, um and like given to you. And I'm kind of thinking, do you know how hard it would be to
Right.
to only have 3 months to figure out, all of these different things? So I think that was uh, every single time I met with like a refugee family, I was always, yeah, always just like really shocked by how much that they had to go through just to get to this point, and then knowing that like the journey was still ongoing, like there was still so much. But then that was also some of my favorite parts was like going to citizenship ceremonies for folks that had been here
Mm,
long enough and had gone through the whole process and now we're US citizens, and those even like some of our staff that happened, and we got to go to their like ceremonies where they, officially get their citizenship. So that was a really, really big high for me, was getting to experience those moments. And then I also think the time that I was serving was right around the time that we started resettling Syrian refugees, which was a big, like at that time, was a big political um, debate. And so our would get like receive threats of,
wow.
people that were really upset that we were like participating and resettling Syrian refugees, which I just never, that was not something that I ever thought that I would be in a situation to experience. And that, yeah, it just was like really scary to think about and just blew my mind, as someone who was actually getting to like meet and spend time with these families, that, yeah, someone could feel so angry, absolutely so angry when, yeah, they had faced a really tough road getting here. And then for that to be like how they were treated when they arrived was just really awful. So,
I was listening to a podcast one time, and this person was reflecting on their experience. And I think this person went, oh, it was Trevor Hall who did the Daily Show.
mhm,
And, when he came in for Jon Stewart, he was saying that people like actually hated him and had death threats. And he goes, you don't even, you don't even know me. Like,
yeah.
what? And I can imagine as a young adult too. One of the things I wanted to ask you about was, what kind of support mechanisms did you have around you? Because experiencing people that are angry for the work that you're doing, which is
Mhm.
you're like connecting with human beings and families, and you're understanding like their struggles and what, you're a college student, you have a little bit more than 3 months to figure things out, right? Like
Right.
we're like, yeah, here's
Mhm.
some things. um and then also that kind of being a young adult and like, I don't know, what kind of support systems did you have in place that you can speak to?
Mhm. Well, I think I was in a good situation in that I had, another Vista member that I was serving with. And then we had like a partner organization that also was hosting Vistas, and we were kind of collaborating together to
Okay.
do a lot of our service. So I had kind of like that built-in support system with my other fellow members. I also lived with an AmeriCorps member during my service, a random person. Shout out to Sally if she's listening
Shout
to
out,
this.
Sally.
A random we randomly got connected, and because we were both serving, and yeah, ended up being really great roommates. And so, and also just kind of having that shared AmeriCorps experience, even though her service
Right.
was very different. But then I think too, the office that I worked at, unfortunately, that was something that many of them had to deal with. And because
Mm,
so many of them were refugees themselves, like very personally had very personal experiences with. And so I think, when things like that would happen, we just would have some time to process, I think, as a team, as an organization, or time, to take time off and do what you needed to do to kind of navigate that and deal with that. So I think it was, helpful to have others that had more experience navigating that and can kind of like guide and support me through that as someone who had never experienced anything like that.
one of the things that we talked about before we hit record was just kind of me like stepping back and trying to find a thread that, and it's really what I'm excited to hear about your Peace Corps experience, because I feel like this really like prepared you to be
Mm,
in, like you were still in your culture, but you were immersed in other cultures, but you could still like go home to your apartment with the other
yeah.
AmeriCorps member, and Peace Corps is not like that. as
Mhm.
far as what I've heard with the 4 interviews that I've had. So let's just say there, I'm no professional on Peace Corps. Um, but one of the things I think is interesting because where you ended up landing is which commission? Montana, Minnesota? I forget my M's.
Minnesota.
Minnesota.
Hmm.
The Minnesota Commission, which, compassion and patience, like in a commission, is so important because you're
Mm,
dealing with programs that are doing all kinds of things. You're working with money, which is super intimate, and money that supports programs that support people. And I feel like that the skills that you probably developed during that AmeriCorps year has made you like such a compassionate,
mm,
understanding person. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you're a terrible person. I don't know. But it seems like I don't know. But it seems like you couldn't not go through that experience and have that interaction with
yeah.
human beings and
Hmm.
also have to deal with things yourself and come out of it without being just different, seeing the world
Yeah.
different, like the difference in the lens. So I speak a little
Hmm.
bit to that and then maybe we can move on to your Peace Corps year.
Yeah, I think relationship building was just such a huge component of my AmeriCorps service. I kind of my, what do they call it? The VAD, the volunteer
I don't know what this stands
description
for.
thing.
Yes.
I can't remember. It was to develop an after school program for immigrant and refugee high school students. And so that took a lot of, and then, ultimately I was kind of facilitating that group. So I was doing a lot of relationship building with students. And then I also kind of
Wow.
served as a volunteer coordinator. So then I was also like interfacing with volunteers who were wanting to support refugees. So it really was, I think the kind of main theme was just like getting to know other people, building strong, trusting relationships. And that definitely, I mean, that was so beneficial and has carried into everything that I've done since then. Especially like the conflict management, I would say that working in an environment where there were so many different cultural backgrounds came with a lot of like situations where it was like, okay, is this person's just being mean, or is it a cultural difference, or is it, something else that's going on? And so really having to be cognizant of that and like work through those things and not jump to conclusions, I think has been something that's, yeah, gone with me forever.
That makes a lot of sense. Understanding those cultural differences is so important too.
Hmm.
I'm not an expert in that, but I've seen and heard and spoken to people who are able to have an experience where they're able to see the differences
Hmm.
in the way people speak or the way they respond or body language and all that
Yeah.
stuff, which is, we take it for granted. We like,
Hmm.
I think we can come from a privileged position, not privileged as in like a power privilege, but just a kind of a blinders of like, oh, this is just how everybody is. But having that experience of immersing, you can
Hmm.
imagine that you just come out so different. Um, so when you closed out your service year, we kind of talked briefly before hitting record that you didn't have much time in between your AmeriCorps service and Peace Corps. Let's talk
Hmm.
about like what made you decide to do Peace Corps, but I want to make sure we close out your AmeriCorps with any last thoughts or anything that you want to make sure that the folks that are listening or watching YouTube, hi out there, want to know about that service year.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me and my service year was just such a good launching pad into everything that came next. And I think, that is very easy to say in hindsight, going back and saying, yes, my AmeriCorps service led me everywhere. And I also think that is really true. And it was just such a great, as someone who was fresh out of undergrad, had really not been on my own before.
Mm,
It just was such like a safe place to try and fail and figure life out, like figure out what it meant to budget and, like not like spend all my money on stupid stuff and apply for public benefits because I wasn't making a lot of money in AmeriCorps service. And just so many life skills that were learned that are not necessarily taught in traditional education. But having like a space to really do that, that was a little, I don't want to say like less intense or less, uh, serious, but yeah, just in a way that made it feel like, had some time to wiggle room to figure things out. Was just really, really great. And I think, I'm a huge advocate for folks taking a year of service. So
Yes. And when I was well, I'm gonna circle back when we're not recording on how to not buy stupid shit. Like I can literally in the room that I'm in, like, I mean, this was a gift, but like I have a magic 8 ball, right? Like I make decisions based off of what this so I'd love to just how do we stop doing those things? But also one of the other things that you said, not necessarily about buying stupid shit, but the ease, and I understand what you're saying. You're like, it wasn't easy, but
hmm
when I was director of Volunteer Maryland, another one of my themes was like, let's fail flamboyantly. Like, it's an
hmm
AmeriCorps service year. We all want you to succeed. We want to get you from the beginning of your service year to the end of your service year. I want that as the director of Volunteer Maryland. Your site supervisor wants it as, the placement site.
hmm
So if you have to make mistakes, let's make the mistakes, let's talk about them, and then let's move on. Let's fix
Yeah.
them. Let's just make it, let's just, so it really is a really great, and, that's for young adults who are coming out of college and not really knowing what they want to do. But I did my service year when I was like 34 years old or 32. I don't
hmm
remember how old I was, but, I did it. I was like, I didn't know I was applying for AmeriCorps. It turned out to be awesome. But, it was really a place where I could figure out what I did well, right?
hmm
Because it wasn't a job. I wasn't going to be there forever. I ended up being
Right.
there for quite a while, though. They hired me afterwards. So that was good. That's another thing to think about, like be on your best behavior because it's like a
hmm
1 year, interview. So I love everything that you said to kind of wrap that up. And so at the end of your service year, what kind of bug got in your ear that you're like, I think I'm gonna do Peace
hmm
Corps? And then what did you do?
Yeah, I think Peace Corps actually had been something I was well aware of before even going to college. It was something that I was introduced to probably in high school. And
Mm,
so that was really kind of like always in the back of my mind as something I was maybe wanting to do. And I actually remember I had a good friend who she applied for Peace Corps to do right after finishing her undergrad. And so she had gotten accepted and I think was kind of trying to tell me, "Hey, maybe you want to do this too." And I had looked into it at the time and just honestly was way too scared. I just was like,
mhm.
nope, this is not for me, not at this time, can't do this, too much. So I kind of deferred it. And then one of the other Vista members that I served with, she hadn't done Peace Corps, but she had taught overseas for a couple years before doing her Vista service. And she met a lot of Peace Corps volunteers doing that. And so she's like, if you have any desire to do this, just go ahead and do it. Go ahead and apply. You don't have to accept, just go ahead and apply. And so I kind of just decided it's like a now or never type deal. I'm young. I don't have any plans. I have nothing that's really keeping me here. And if I don't do it now, I don't know that I will ever do it. So if it's something I want to try to do, I should just go for it. So I did end up applying probably like 3 or 4 months before my Vista service ended. And I had, my interview the month before my service ended. And then I didn't hear anything for like months. So I ended up getting a couple part-time jobs. I worked at a public library and I worked at a community college. And then finally in the fall, like around October, I got my acceptance letter. So then I just kind of uh, got ready for like
Figured
the
it
next
out.
9
Yeah.
months.
Yeah. Like I said, I've only interviewed a handful of folks who did Peace Corps, 3 total. And the theme of if not now, then when, I think that's
hmm
actually on Justin's thumbnail that's coming out here. Or probably already came out after this podcast is up. Um, and then another one was from Thomas Darnell, like don't think it's not you, right? Like,
hmm
and so I really am inspired by the leap of faith because I kind of
hmm
live my life like that, where I'm like, well, let's just see if this works out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's always like stepping blindly. If you ever do, I like I work with tarot, and the first card is the fool's card, and it's really just like
Hmm.
about like, oh, let's just take a giant leap and see what happens.
Yeah.
Um, and I, and I say that with all due respect. It's not like people who go through Peace Corps are like, oh, let's just see how this works out.
Right.
But it's something where the individual is really interested in doing Peace Corps, and you really have to do a self check. I love that you said I was not ready right after college.
Hmm.
And that's also good to know too. Like, not yet, but then when the opportunity came up, you were like, yes, I
Hmm.
can do this. I can do that.
Yep.
That's exciting.
Yeah. And it felt definitely felt a lot more exciting. I think after that year of AmeriCorps service and felt much more doable of like,
Hmm.
okay, I kind of know how to be an adult, kind of know like what this is like, kind
We'll
of,
have to touch base on that too, because I
yeah,
don't think I have that
no.
down pat. Yeah. So, anyways, okay, so you got your you got your acceptance, and you found out where you were going. Where did you go?
Oh yeah. So when I applied, I originally, there's if you're not familiar with the application process, you can specify if you want to go somewhere specifically. You can specify if you want to serve in a particular sector, or you
Mm,
can also say you will go anywhere that you want. Or you can also say where you're not willing to go.
mm,
And I believe I actually had requested somewhere in South America, not a specific country, but I just kind of was like, I've never been to South America. That seems cool. I took Spanish in high school, you know. Um, but then I said my second choice was, send me anywhere. If you're not going to send me there, send me anywhere. And so there's like a running joke that if you say you're willing to go anywhere, Peace Corps will send you somewhere in Africa. And that's what happened. I was sent to Eswatini, which at the time was Swaziland, which is a very, very small country in Southern Africa. It's almost completely landlocked by South
mm.
Africa. Um, so yeah, that is where I went, and I was placed as a youth development specialist, volunteer specialist.
So, oh, go
Yeah.
ahead. I was going to
No,
say,
but
so the other interviewers that I chatted with, they said the first thing that they really had to do was immerse themselves in language. Was that something that you experienced as well?
yes. So the first, as you mentioned, Peace Corps service is 27 months, typically for like a standard term. The first 3 months of that is all training. So you do training in country once you arrive. So for my program, for my country, we're housed with host families during
Mm.
our 3 months of training and had like 3 to 4 hours of language lessons every single day to really learn the language. And then we actually had a requirement you had to pass, you'd had to be at a certain level of proficiency in order to be sworn in at the after the training end. So it was almost like a 3 month long job interview in some ways. You are like learning all of these things that you need to be successful, and they're also kind of testing you at each step of the way to make sure, one, that you've got the language, one, you're like mentally going to be okay, that you have, the tools that you need, that you're going to be successful. So in some ways that was a little bit stressful, but also I really loved like the language lessons. We had a kind of a local tutor. We were broken up into small groups, and so we would just kind of go every day and meet at his house and have our language lesson, and then have tea and cookies afterward.
Well, that's fun.
Yeah.
Well, and when I started, and I started off with kind of the mission of Peace Corps, and the goal is to promote world peace and friendship by helping people from other countries, and by helping Americans and people from other countries understand each other better. Like, what's not better than learning a language and sharing
Hmm.
a meal, right? Like,
Yeah.
this is this is such a thread. I'm so excited. I almost want to expand this series, because we went into it deep with John, which was a podcast that we posted a few weeks ago, and we talked about language and
Mm.
how important it was for him to go into a community and for somebody that looked like him, which was a white man, to
Mhm.
speak the language and speak the
Yeah.
dialect and to connect with people in that ways. And then also,
Yeah, I would say that was huge. And I think that, you know, Siswati is the national language of Swaziland. And then English, of course, is like the second national language. So a vast majority of people that I met did speak English. And so I think, seeing me, the assumption was just like, oh, I should just speak English with this person. Um, and so it was really cool to be able to like greet people, which greetings are very big in Eswatini. It's really, really important to actually I like telling this. The word that you use to greet someone is sawubona, which literally means I see you. And I just think that is so powerful. Like that was something that was so powerful to me, is like you're literally telling someone, I like see you, I acknowledge you as a person, that you are here. Um, and so that was, even just to be able to like greet someone in the language, and really, I think, showed to them like, oh, this person is, not just a tourist, not just someone passing through, but really someone that is, yeah, trying to learn and understand and like really be a part of this community. So yeah, I think the language was super powerful, and I think it makes total sense for that to be such a main focus in the first 3 months of service.
it's almost like these Peace Corps people know what they're doing,
Yeah,
right? The
right?
organize, gosh, the directors of these, they they just stumbled across it. And I say that jokingly, obviously, because I remember when I went through my AmeriCorps year, and I was like every training, every reflection, every experience built on it, and I was like,
Hmm.
wow, like we just learned that last week in the training, and now we're doing this. And then when I became director of the same program, I'm like, I was built into the program,
Hmm.
but
Yep.
I get it. There was some thought going into that for sure. So that's exciting. So you were in education, right? You said,
Hmm.
so
Yes.
what, so you learned the language, you passed the 3 month interview.
Hmm.
What were some of the things that you worked on right away? And then what are some things that you're just proud of and that you want to
Hmm.
speak about?
Sure. Well, after training, and I don't know, I think these things kind of work a little bit different depending on what country you're in. So after finishing training, we were all assigned our communities. So we were all placed in different communities across the country. My community was like the very northern part of Eswatini, so right by the South Africa border. Um, and you're kind of tasked with really just spending the first couple months like figuring it out. So everyone was placed with the host family. So I lived with the host family for the entire 2 years, and really just spent kind of like the beginning getting to know my family, getting to know the community, walking around, talking to people. Um, I was kind of placed at a elementary school, so I became like really familiar with the staff there, and just kind of like checking in with them on, that they were maybe interested in doing. I was the first Peace Corps volunteer that had ever been in the community, so they like we were all learning together at the same time. Actually, I like telling this. The word that you use to greet someone is sawubona, which literally means I see you. And I just think that is so powerful. Like that was something that was so powerful to me, is like you're literally telling someone, I like see you, I acknowledge you as a person, that you are here. Um, and so that was, even just to be able to like greet someone in the language, and really, I think, showed to them like, oh, this person is, not just a tourist, not just someone passing through, but really someone that is, yeah, trying to learn and understand and like really be a part of this community. So, really, we're figuring all this out together. We were learning together. We were figuring out what it meant to have this partnership and to do this thing. Um, and I think after like a few months, I can't even remember how I got connected with this woman. But I kind of got connected with this woman who was like very well known in the community, very well respected, just knew a lot of people, knew kind of
You
uh,
muted again.
oh my gosh, can you hear me now?
Yes. It's all right. Mercury's doing something.
Yeah,
Mercury's
what
getting
is
ready
going
to
on?
retro. Blame it on the planets. They can't fend for themselves. So
Ah,
you met a woman in the community that was super connected.
um, really well respected, knew the ins and outs. Um, yeah, just had a lot of good insight, and she kind of became my official counterpart. Who, someone that I was just really going to kind of partner up with to figure out, okay, what are we actually going to do here? Like, what are we going to
Yeah.
do during my service? And side note, I ended up moving in with her and her family at one point, kind of early on. There was a safety incident where I had to move out of my host family, like original host family's home.
Wow.
And so her and her husband and all of their kids ended up taking me in. And so I ended up moving in with her, and I spent the rest of my service, like about a year and a half, living with her. So she really, like, she was my counterpart, and like she was my mom. She was my host mom during
So
service.
sweet.
And we talked about that a lot, about like, okay, how are we going to navigate this relationship of, we're family now, and we're trying to work together to do these projects. um but a couple of the things that we decided to do, I think kind of our big project was getting a school library up at the elementary school. So that was kind of our big long term, like that took pretty much my entire service to do. The school had books, some books. They had a space available, but they had like no knowledge of how to set up a library or do any sort of like checkout process
Mm,
or just I think like reading in general was really promoted as you're like reading to gain a certain set of knowledge that you're going to use to pass a test,
mm,
versus reading for enjoyment or
yeah.
for like language development or whatever. So that kind of became our big focus, was like getting this library up and running. And then after we kind of got it all set up, doing some like training on library programming. So like story time, reading out loud, and reading for like comprehension, and just like imagination. And then we kind of developed a schedule for like when all the classes would come into the library and read. And so that was one of my favorite projects, just because it was so time consuming, but then the results were really wonderful to see, like to see kids just laying around on the floor reading books.
That's so
Um,
cool.
yeah, so that was kind of our big project that took most of the time, but was, yeah, really worth it for sure.
And reading is one of those things, and I'm not a literacy like professional in any way, shape, or form. And actually, I didn't do much reading as a kid. My sister was always reading books. She was reading all the Nancy Drew and everything. And I was like, yeah, I'm good. Like, I don't know what I did. But after I went to university and I did all my and I went back when I was in my 30s.
Mm.
So I was there, I read all the books. Like I wasn't your typical college student. I was like, yes, I read everything and I want to talk about all of it, like all of it. And everybody sitting behind me, because of course I sat in the front of the classroom,
Mhm.
we're like, oh my God, can this lady just shut up so we can get out of class early? I was like, but after I finished, I was like, well, I I need to I want to continue reading. And so then
Yeah.
and then that brought me into professional development and spirituality and stuff like that. And I mean, you can't really see, but I have a giant stack of books like everywhere in every corner.
Hmm.
My daughter's friend came into the house one day and she looked around our house and she goes, "You have a lot of books and a lot of plants in your house." And then she goes, I looked around and I was like, yeah, we actually do have a lot of books and plans.
Hmm.
But I wanted to say real quick that I think that like something that's so exciting, and I felt this when you were telling the story, is especially with the kids laying around the floor reading books, is that
Hmm.
there's a freedom and an escape, right? When
Yeah.
you're reading books, and there's an empowerment of like, I'm gonna go into this person's life, read something. Anyways, you go into these stories and just kind of check out of your own life, whether your life's good or bad or whatever. It's just fun.
Hmm.
And to be able to have a place where kids can and anybody can go enjoy themselves. That's for like, I'm excited for that project. I'm happy for you.
Yeah.
That
Thank you.
hit. That hit.
Yeah, and I think I'm for sure an avid reader too, and so that, definitely felt more of like a personal project too, because it just felt like it really aligned with something that I'm also interested in. And so then to kind of feel like I was able to pass some of that on, maybe hopefully to at least one
Yeah.
kid. I
Yeah.
think some of the kids still were like, who cares about this? I don't, what, but for I think the younger ones in particular that were, 6, 7 years old and kind of first being introduced to kind of this concept of reading for fun.
Mm.
Yeah, that was really powerful. And it was fun too to do the story time with them. I really like to read to those kids. They were cute.
Were there any other projects that you worked on? Like, how did you close out your Peace Corps year? And like, how do you say goodbye to people? Because it's not like you're like, oh, I'm gonna
Yeah.
be back. I'm gonna drive up to Rhode Island from Connecticut
Hmm.
and see you on the weekend. Like,
Right.
sorry, I hope I'm not triggering any wounds. Like, tell me
No,
about the hardest time of your life.
no. Yeah,
This was
we
not
ended
a
up
trauma
doing.
informed question.
That's okay. We're a little far removed at this point, so can yeah, can dig in. But we did a number of projects together. There was Peace Corps does a lot of other trainings on like specific curriculum that you can implement. So we had done some um, like health curriculum at one point, did kind of like a weekend workshop thing. I'd done a girls empowerment after school club. But I think one of my favorite projects um, was this Footbridge project, which, Peace Corps is like generally doesn't encourage you to do stuff like that because, do I know anything about building? No, I do not. Uh, um, but I kind of selfishly, this is actually something when I was kind of first in my community walking around. This was like one of the first things that people were telling me. They're like, we need this bridge. We need a bridge. And at the time, I'm like, heck no, I don't know anything about bridge. I'm not the person for that. But then when I moved in with my other host family, I actually lived on the side of the community that had to cross this like stream every day. And it was like pretty treacherous. It would get in the rainy season, it would get super muddy. I actually had like multiple instances of me like sliding down this muddy path to try to cross over this area. Um, and so yeah, I was like, you know what? Let's do the bridge.
Do the bridge.
Let's do the bridge.
I am a bridge builder.
And but I think what was like so I would say kind of unique about that was that it really was a community effort. I was really just kind of like the initiator of like, hey, let's actually do this. And then the community really rallied behind it and like they were the ones that did all of the work. Um, I just kind of was like, let's apply for this Peace Corps grant to like be able to buy
Oh,
supplies, you know?
yeah.
Um, so yeah, we kind of came together over one weekend. Someone, chopped down a tree up the mountain and like brought these like huge pieces of lumber that we laid across. And then with the grant money, we had purchased some actual like wood that we could make this footpath with. And then it was actually funny. We ran out of supplies about halfway through. And everyone that was there working on it was like, went home and just grabbed whatever materials they had at home and brought it back to finish it out. And so it really was like once they started seeing it come together, it was like, okay, well, we can't not finish this now. And so people went home like, I've got some nails, I've got some piece of wood, I've got like a chainsaw I can cut things up with. And they, yeah, finished it out and even put this like cute little railing on it so that the kids like could go across and they weren't going to like fall off the side. And that was just really, yeah, that day was really, really, really special. And just kind of to see how everyone came together and then to like see my host siblings go across it because that's how they had to get to school every day. So,
Mm.
and then I got to use it too because I also had to cross it every day to get to school.
That sounds like, oh my gosh, Sadie, all your stories. I'm like, oh, Sadie's saving the world. Uh,
Okay. No.
one of the things I love about that story too is um it's like common sense, right? Like you used your common sense. Like you're like, hmm, I have to cross the stream every day. They have to cross the stream every day. It's not in my, if you were a Vista member, not in my bad or whatever, not my
Hmm.
position description, not necessarily something that I should totally do on my own and be like, we're going to build this bridge and it's going to make your life better. It was more like, so I'm thinking if you guys are interested, like,
Yeah.
let's like do this thing and then we don't have to get all muddy or fall or whatever might
Hmm.
happen. And then the like rallying the community. But the wild, audacious idea of something that might just having an idea, so I love that experience. And
Hmm.
then that was very touching when you said your host siblings walking over the bridge. That's so cool. It sounds like you had
Yeah.
a really impactful year or 2 years for the
Mhm.
community and then also for yourself.
Yeah, I think part of, just living with the host family too was just, I mean, that's something that anyone that asks me about Peace Corps, as I say, that for me was the most impactful part because, there are a lot of different Peace Corps countries do that very differently. Some volunteers have their own house, some like live with the host family like I did, some, you know, very different situations depending on where you go. But for me, that was just such a huge added benefit because I really was like embedded in the community and really kind of had like a built-in support system too. I love my host family. I still talk to them. It's been
Oh,
five
yay.
years and we still text on WhatsApp. Um, and so that, yeah, was just a huge bonus, huge bonus. And honestly, like I couldn't have done any of the projects without my host mom, who was also my counterpart. I mean, she just such a powerhouse.
That's so cool. So how do you like let's wrap your Peace Corps year. How do you just pack and go, I'm going back across the pond later,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It was so funny. I felt like when I was leaving to go to Peace Corps, I had this like whole crisis moment. Like it was so hard to leave home and go there. And then I felt like the exact same thing happened when I
Oh,
was going back to the US. Um, and yeah, I mean, to kind of like close things out in my community, there is the local kind of like chiefdom is called the Umpagazzi. And so it's like a group of the local leaders. So like I had to go and essentially like present to them about the things that we had accomplished together. And then also that, I was going to be leaving and this was going to be my last day. And then kind of did something similar just with the school. And the school actually threw me a really, really, really beautiful goodbye party. And so like a lot of the members of the community came to that and it was so cool. Like all the kids performed and did like traditional dances and
that's cool.
they gave me all of the traditional clothing. I cried like a baby the entire time, which I think people were kind of like, no one had really seen me do that before. And I think they were kind of shocked and also like, can you get it together a little bit?
Pull yourself together. We still have more programming.
Yeah, but that was really sweet. And then my last week there was really just with my host family. And on a related note, my one of my host sisters, who our birthday, we're like a week apart in age. Our birthdays are a week apart. So my host mom called us her twins. Um,
Aw.
and she had a baby while I was there, and she had her baby about 3 months before I left. And when we threw a little baby shower for her, she asked if she could give her daughter my name, my American name, as her middle name. So yes, I was like sobbing, like, oh my God, of course.
Gosh.
So my last
Wow.
3 months of service, honestly, I just like hung out with this baby. I could not get enough of her. I just spent a ton of time with my family, and then, um, yeah, just really was kind of like soaking it all in together. And we just kind of didn't want to talk about me leaving at all. But then before I left, I kind of did a like I got some gifts for my whole host family. So I put together like a photo album for them of just like all of the photos of us together in the last 2 years, and got all my host siblings like a little gift. And then yeah, the last day, the morning that I got picked up from Peace Corps staff to go, I was just sobbing like crazy. My host family was crying. It just was. I remember my host mom was hugging me and comforting me. She's like, "It'll be okay. It'll be
Oh,
okay." Yeah, it just like felt so reminiscent of like the exact conversation I'd had with my mom
yeah.
in the States when I was leaving, that it just, yeah, kind of like felt full circle moment of like, okay, now I've, done this thing, and it's going to be okay too when I get back home. So
That's
it was
amazing.
hard.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing those really intimate and personal experiences that you had and being, somewhat vulnerable of, and honest and
Hmm.
authentic to sharing your story. If that didn't excite somebody to like, not the crying and horrible feeling of leaving, but just the fact that it really changed and moved you as a person
Hmm.
and getting to know, if you think about it, like these people on the other side of the world existed before you knew they existed, and they were living their life and they were doing their thing,
Hmm.
and for some reason you had to experience these people at some
Hmm.
point in your life. And I think that if we think about that from like a metaphysical sort of thing, like everybody's brought into our experience for a reason or a season. So let's close out your Peace Corps year, and then maybe just briefly talk about what you're doing now if you want.
Sure.
And like after your Peace Corps year, close out your Peace Corps year, what were your next steps? And then like maybe what are you most excited about either in your personal life or professional life? And then I'll close it out with the
Hmm.
big question.
Sure. I I feel like I left Peace Corps also not knowing what I wanted to do with my life.
Yeah.
Classic. But I think the one thing I kind of realized at that point was I think kind of like where my skill set lied. I felt like I was really good at planning, organizing, doing a lot of this kind of like behind the scenes work. And so I kind of knew when I came back home, I was planning to apply for jobs, and like was really looking at work that was kind of more of like the program management side of things, um, and less of the direct service work. I think through Peace Corps and AmeriCorps, I had done that part, and it was great, and it served a wonderful purpose. And I was like ready for the next thing. So I ended up getting a position with another AmeriCorps program here in Minnesota, Reading Corps, Math Corps. And I worked as a program manager there for about 3 years before I took a position at the state commission for AmeriCorps programs. So now I'm a program officer here at Serve Minnesota, get to support the programs that I worked at, types of programs that I served at. And I think that's just been such a cool experience to kind of see how all of these things have built on each other and have really
Mhm.
given me perspective on all of my subsequent positions to, I think, better inform how I am in those roles now.
Yeah, I think like in reflecting on my own experience and some of the other folks that I know within the the commission landscape, it's really it's really cool for those folks who were boots on the ground to make their way. And it's not a line, folks. Like it is
Hmm.
kind of a shell, a structure that you kind of go in a circle and you kind of end up and you have this understanding, especially if you go from like a program, like you said, being a program manager into a commission where now you're working with program managers that are waiting for information from you. So you have this little bit of like, I really can't say anything yet, but FYI, it's coming out in like 2 days,
Yeah.
and it may be something like this. I'm just saying, right, just because you were the one on the other side of that, and
Hmm.
that program manager in that program has their members that they're trying
Hmm.
to get through the door or whatever that might be. And I, that perspective of coming from each level,
Right.
I feel like if you can go from member to program officer to commission, there's just kind of an easier landing there. What's your favorite thing
Absolutely.
about being in the commission? One of.
Uh, Good question. I think for me, it's been like being able to see the big picture because I
Yeah.
think in my other, as a Vista and then as a program staff, I did not know the big picture. And now I'm like, oh wow, all this makes sense. This
Yeah.
really makes sense. Like why we had this policy when I was a program staff that made no sense to me. Now I'm like, oh yes, that really makes a
Congress,
lot of
blame
sense.
it all on Congress. We love
Yeah, so I
Congress.
think just like being able to put the puzzle pieces together a little bit and see, and then I think too, just you can get so confined to like the one
Mm,
program that you're working with that being on the commission level and really being able to experience and get to know all the programs and just see all the cool things that folks are doing, not just in Minnesota, but around the country. I just feel like
yeah.
it's just really expanded my view of like all the things that AmeriCorps does. And yeah, that's just really exciting to see.
I really liked how um I liked the commission culture of how we had it was like a sharing culture and it was
Mhm.
never a competitive or lack,
Yeah.
especially, there were some grants out there that states could, apply for this and that, but it was really a learning community. And I always felt like when I was with the Maryland State Service Commission and also the South Carolina Service Commission, that like I had peers that I could go to as an executive director and just show up dumb. Just be like,
Hmm.
I don't know how this works. Like, what are you doing? Like, what
Yeah.
what are you doing? And like learning from the Colorados and the Californias and the ones
Hmm.
that are like innovating and moving quick, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I think that that type of environment, I'm not necessarily in my 9 to 5 does have a Vista program, but I'm not like part of the management of that.
Hmm.
But it has definitely trickled into the other work that I do where I want to create these communities of collaboration. I'm working with higher education
Hmm.
folks that are doing community engagement. And I'm like, share your resources, share, like, let's connect and like, let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's support each other. And I think that
Hmm.
that's really the community and culture. At least that's the way I felt about
Yeah,
when I was in the commission.
I agree. It's such a collaborative atmosphere, and I love that. I love like being able to reach out to some random person and say, "Hey, I think like you maybe collected this information at one point. Can I like now need it? Can we share? Can we talk about it? Or can you share about your experience doing this really weird thing or following this weird regulation?"
Right.
Yeah, it's
CFR.
super helpful.
Yeah. So let's land the plane. What is something that you're either you're excited about, either professionally or personally? You mentioned you had a dog. I don't know if that wants to be, but yeah, like what's something that's kind of top of mind that you're like, oh, I can't wait to do this.
Yeah,
Could
well,
be
I
a
actually
new workout program. I don't know. Whatever.
Well, this is going to be a twofold. I'll share how I spent my AmeriCorps money, my education award.
Oh yeah.
I started a master's program this fall, so I am currently in graduate school now, and actually use my AmeriCorps Education Award and my Peace Corps Coverdell to pay for it. So another plug for both, and being able to combine the resources there. So yeah, I am in graduate school right now, getting to get a master's in public affairs. And that I am really excited about that just because of the relevance to what I'm doing now at the commission and really being able to um, like not just go to school to learn a bunch of theories and not know what I'm doing, but to really go and have it be really practical and immediately applicable to my job, which has just, as overwhelming and it's been a lot to be working full time and going to grad school. But um, yeah, I love learning and I love this program that I'm a part of. And so that's just like something that's really been exciting and stressful, but great to, have the resources to help fund that, which is, not always possible. So
It's awesome. I didn't do a full graduate program, but I did a graduate certificate. University of
Hmm.
Maryland, can't see it. For some reason, my background's blurred, but whatever. But I did it during the pandemic.
Mm.
So I was on Zoom calls sometimes from 8 in the morning because we had a 8 o'clock call with the Maryland Emergency Management every single morning. So sometimes I was on Zoom from 8 in the morning till almost 10 or 11 o'clock at night.
Oh my gosh.
And then, of
No,
course, all of your work was online
yep,
and everything. Like,
that's a lot.
I think I ended up with like perpetual headaches just from looking at the screen. But that's so exciting. I love how you were able to combine the two education awards.
Yeah.
Um, Anything else that you want to say on either what you're doing now or just wrapping up anything? And then I'm going to ask you the big question.
Um, no.
Good. No,
So,
I think you really wrapped everything up really well, and your stories, especially like the Peace Corps stories, and even just connecting with the refugees and understanding that, like, I
mhm.
really think that people are going to get a lot from what you shared. So thank you for that. So the big question, is trying to figure out, what do we do next, right? Like, there's 1.3 million AmeriCorps alum. Not all of them are still with us, obviously, but what do you think we could do on really a macro level?
Mm,
What would you love to be part of?
great question. I think at the commission, we're always talking about alumni engagement and how are we engaging with folks, and programs are thinking about that too. And Um, I think just in my experience, AmeriCorps is such a common connector between so many people that you don't even really know. Like
Hmm.
I, started doing intros at with my grad school program and said that I was an AmeriCorps alum, and then like three other people spoke up and I was like, oh, I did AmeriCorps too. And so I think part of it is just like sharing that. And
Yeah.
I think there are so many people that we probably come across that are a part of this network that we don't know about. And it's like as soon as you meet someone, similar with Peace Corps, I think, as soon as you meet someone that has had that similar experience, you're like connecting, you're already talking about things. And I see the way kind of like Peace Corps handles their alumni network, and always wonder like, wow, it'd be so great if AmeriCorps could do something similar of like, being able to say like, I'm a returned Peace Corps volunteer. Like that's like a badge of honor almost. And how cool would it be for AmeriCorps alum to have that same level of um, pride and like being more, I think, like willing to talk about it and share about it. I don't know what the big difference is between the two, but I feel like there is. I have felt a difference between those two, and just kind of like the networking thing. So I don't know, large scale. I think it just would be cool to be able to connect more. I know of folks that try to do that kind of on the local level, but yeah, what opportunities, things like this that are getting people to talk more and share, and really like building those connections, I think is a huge thing to be doing.
That's so good. And I 100% agree with normalizing. Hi, I'm Nicki Fiocco, an AmeriCorps alum, right? Like,
Hmm.
that's just part of my introductions. I'm Nicki Fiocco, and I'm an AmeriCorps alum. And I agree. You can go anywhere and you say I'm an AmeriCorps alum, and I experienced the same thing in my
Yeah.
graduate certificate with University of Maryland. There was like five people in the room. One of my professors worked at the agency when it was
Hmm.
CNCS and the Obama administration, right? And I was like, my mind is literally blown. Like,
Yeah.
like we're
Yeah.
like ants. We're like, we are everywhere,
Hmm.
So 100% agree. And I totally think the connection thing is so important. And that's like
Hmm.
the heart of this podcast, because we all have something to share. And just to exactly what you spoke to, once I know that you're an AmeriCorps member, you're an AmeriCorps alum, there's a tiny bit more trust, maybe
Hmm.
even a lot of trust, where I'm like, oh, you get it. You get like,
Hmm.
whew, didn't really know what I was getting into all the way. So, you know, you are a contractor and you can do evaluations. Like, let's talk about it. Maybe I
Right.
can bring you into my program, and I trust you a little bit more to understand these struggles that I go through. So 100% agree. Hoping on the back end that some of that stuff can kind of roll out. So I appreciate that reflection for sure. And I think this is a good place to stop, unless you feel like, so I need to say one more thing.
No, I feel good. This is
Awesome.
great.
Well, thank you so much. And we did it like an hour and 15 minutes. That was good. We'll see. We'll see how editing this goes. Thank you all for listening to another AmeriCorps Connections podcast. And we will have another edition of the dual service. I think we have two more folks that we're going to interview, and then we'll wrap that series. So if it's something you want to hear more about, definitely drop me a line and check out our Patreon. Become just a little $5 a month. It would be amazing. All right. Take care, everyone. See ya.